They came like gods, but uglier. Huge silver ships ripped the sky open over every major city. Their weapons didn't fire bullets or beams. They erased matter, vaporizing entire buildings like they'd never existed. No demands, no broadcasts, just instant domination. Within 48 hours, Earth's military was dust. They didn't conquer it like rulers. They ravaged it like bored monsters. I watched them erase my brother's unit outside Madrid. Not kill, erase. No blood, no bodies. Just silence. We called them the Varnaks. At least that's the closest translation from their war code we cracked. Over 7 feet tall, plated in black bone. Faces that looked like dried-out corpses baked in the sun. And they were smug. That was the worst part. They didn't fight because they had to. They fought because they believed we were a mistake. They called us unfinished. 3 months in, the planet wasn't ours anymore. Cities were turned into slave camps or scorched craters. Satellites were gone. No internet, no GPS. Just static and fear. I was stationed out near the Canadian Rockies when everything collapsed. I shouldn't have survived. My squad died during a Varnak's purge on day 19. I was buried under rubble for 2 days, feeding off melted snow and chewing my own tongue to stay conscious. But something didn't let me die. Something kept me alive. When I dragged myself out of the ruins, I wasn't alone. There were others, not soldiers, not leaders. Just broken people, a miner, a runaway, a disillusioned priest, an old native woman who hadn't spoken English in 10 years. We all ended up in the same ravine, drawn to the same impossible place, a massive stone circle that had been unearthed during a Varnak's bombing. The old woman just stared at it and whispered one word. Wakan. I didn't understand it, not then. But the moment I touched the stones, the wind stopped. Completely. The air went still like the planet was holding its breath. Then the ground began to hum. We thought the Varnaks had turned on some weapon, but this wasn't theirs. It was older, deeper. It didn't come from space. It came from Earth, and it was angry. That night we saw the sky burn red. Not from bombs, but from something rising out of the oceans, the forests, the deserts. Not machines, not aliens, not gods, guardians. That's what the old woman called them. Guardians of the earth. Not mythical spirits, not fantasy beasts. Something between nature and war, ancient intelligences that had once slept beneath tectonic plates, inside glaciers, buried in volcanic ash. Not alive, not dead. Waiting. And we, broken, hunted, humiliated humans had accidentally awakened them. Or maybe Earth had done it herself. The Varnaks didn't expect it. Why would they? To them, Earth was a rock with mammals. But they forgot something. Our planet had survived extinction-level events. It had wiped out entire species with a twitch. It had bred predators so perfect they didn't need to evolve for 100 million years. And deep inside its crust, it had kept its weapons. I saw one of them for the first time the next morning. It rose from the forest like a moving mountain. Not metal, not flesh. A blend. Covered in bark and bone and something darker underneath, glowing veins of molten core light like the Earth's blood. It didn't roar, it breathed, and trees bent backward like they were saluting. We called it the First. The old woman just smiled and whispered, "You made them remember?" The Varnaks tried to strike it down. They sent their elite units, their capital airship, their deadliest weapons. The First didn't even flinch. It moved through them like death wearing patience. And when it was done, all that remained was ash. I wish I could say that was the turning point, that we fought back and won right then. But it was only the beginning. We didn't control the Guardians. We didn't lead them. We weren't even sure they liked us. But we had one thing in common. Hatred for the invaders. And Earth never forgets what bleeds her. The first destroyed everything in its path. Varnax patrols, drones, even one of their command crawlers, which was supposed to be indestructible. It wasn't fast, it wasn't flashy, but it moved with the kind of certainty you only see in storms or tsunamis. No hesitation, no warning, just destruction. And it didn't stop to celebrate. It didn't speak. It didn't even look at us. It just moved on, heading north through the woods like it had somewhere to be. That's when I realized we weren't part of its plan. We weren't allies. We were witnesses. The old woman, her name was Ayana, I found out later, said something that stuck with me. The Earth does not love its children. It just remembers them. That line played over in my head as we followed the first from a distance, keeping to the trees, staying out of sight. We didn't know what else to do. Cities were gone. Command was gone. Satellites, leaders, governments, wiped clean. All we had was instinct. There were 6 of us. Me, Ayana, a quiet man named Brent who didn't talk about his past, a miner from Alberta named Nolan who carried a sledgehammer like it was sacred, a thin teenager who wouldn't give her name, and the disillusioned priest, Father Keen, or at least that's what he called himself. We were the last kind of people you'd expect to stand against a galactic army. But something had changed since the first rose. We weren't the same anymore. It wasn't just hope. Hope is a lie when you're starving and hunted. This was something deeper, something primal. Like something old inside us had woken up, too. We marched for days, scavenging abandoned ruins, hiding from Varnax scouts, eating whatever didn't make us vomit. Ayana said the other Guardians would wake soon. She didn't explain how she knew. She just said, "When the first breathes, the rest remember." And she was right. We saw it on the 7th day. We were crossing a dead valley in northern British Columbia when the ground split in 2. Literally. Like a giant invisible axe had been slammed into the earth. Trees collapsed, birds screamed, and a fault line ripped open beneath our feet. Then came the sound. Not a roar, not a tremor. It was like the earth moaned, loud, low, and grieving. A sound so full of pain it made Brent fall to his knees and scream into the dirt. Then it rose. We only saw part of it, a massive shape formed from layers of crystal, mud, and ancient fossils. It had no eyes, no limbs in the traditional sense, but it moved like it wanted something, like it had a purpose. We later named it the Deep One, the second Guardian. It didn't come toward us. It headed south, toward the Varnax Tower near the old city of Spokane. The Varnax had turned that area into a forward operating base, using enslaved humans to build a launch platform for their orbital raiders. We weren't there to see it fall, but we saw the smoke, and we heard the screams on the wind. Whatever the Deep One did to that base, it wasn't quick. We walked in silence after that. No one asked what the Guardians were. Nobody had answers. But we all knew this much. Earth wasn't defenseless, not anymore. Still, that didn't mean we were safe. The Varnax hadn't been wiped out, far from it. They were regrouping, retaliating. They started razing villages near where the Guardians had passed, burning entire forests. Sending hunter drones into caves and canyons to flush out survivors. They weren't just angry, they were scared. And scared enemies are the most dangerous. We saw the aftermath of one of their retaliations 3 days later. A refugee camp tucked in the cliffs of the Rockies. Over 100 people, families, elders, kids, all dead, but not just killed, arranged, hung from trees in patterns, burned in circular formations. I don't know what message the Varnax thought they were sending, but it worked. Nolan lost it when he saw his cousin's body, nailed to a burned-out husk of a car. He went quiet for hours. Then he started sharpening the edge of his sledgehammer. No one asked him why. We all knew. The Varnax weren't just wiping us out. They were trying to unmake us, strip our history, desecrate our dead, humiliate our spirit. But there's something about being that low, about standing in front of your own extinction and knowing you've got nothing left to lose. It does something to the human mind, something violent, something ancient. That night we found an old relay station in the woods, abandoned tech, dusty, but some of the equipment still worked. I managed to wire into a signal booster using leftover parts. Brent handled the battery. He used to work with backup systems in a mining colony before the invasion. We sent a message. Not to the Varnax, not to the world, to anyone still listening. This is Echo Team. Survivors in the Northwest region. The Guardians are real. Earth is fighting back. If you're alive, don't run. Don't hide. Watch the old places. The sacred grounds. They're waking up. We will not die quietly. Echo out. We didn't know if anyone heard it, but I slept with my rifle a little closer that night. The third Guardian didn't rise from the earth. It fell from the sky. It happened 2 weeks later, outside what used to be Calgary. We were trying to connect with another group of survivors who'd been moving through the Badlands when we saw a bright green light tearing across the sky. At first, we thought it was a Varnax missile, but it didn't explode. It landed. The shockwave knocked us off our feet. Thunder rolled for 10 minutes straight. And when the dust cleared, we saw the crater. Inside it, wrapped in coils of scorched atmosphere and glowing metal, was something impossible. It looked like a human figure, but made of obsidian, ash, and starlight. 10 feet tall. Wings of stone folded behind its back. A face that seemed to change every time you blinked. Old, young, male, female, nothing. We didn't name it. It didn't need a name. We just called it the One Who Returned. Ayana cried when she saw it. Not all Guardians were born here, she said. Some were sent back. That Guardian didn't wait. It walked toward the nearest Varnax airbase and leveled it with a wave of its hand. Not magic, not some laser weapon, just a gesture, like it was brushing away dust. We watched from 20 miles away. That's how far the explosion carried. We didn't cheer. We were too stunned. This wasn't war anymore. This was retribution. And yet, something inside me couldn't relax. Because with each Guardian that rose, the Varnax grew more violent. Their tactics shifted from domination to obliteration. They stopped taking prisoners. They stopped collecting resources. They started glassing entire regions, melting forests, lakes, anything that could hide a Guardian. They called in more reinforcements from their fleet. Worse, they began constructing something massive, something high above the planet in near orbit. We could see it blinking in the night sky like a second moon. We didn't know what it was, but it scared the hell out of us. And the Guardians, as powerful as they were, weren't enough to stop that. So we made a choice. We stopped following. We started planning. We couldn't win with strength, but humans were never built to overpower. We were built to outlast, outthink, and out-adapt. It was time to remind the Varnax what they were dealing with. We needed to get inside their orbital launcher before it finished construction. And that meant moving through what used to be Seattle, now called Zone Red 9 by the Varnax. It was a suicide mission. None of us expected to come back. But I looked at Brent, at Nolan, at Ayana, who still spoke to the trees every night, at the girl who'd finally told us her name. Leah, just 16. Already more scarred than most soldiers. We had already died in so many ways. All that was left was the fight. As we prepped to move out, I took one last look at the sky. Another Guardian had just risen from the Arctic, a beast of ice and rage, breathing cold fire that froze airships mid-flight. I whispered to myself the same words I'd spoken the night the invasion began. You picked the wrong planet. But this time I didn't say it with fear. I said it with a smile. Seattle wasn't a city anymore. It was a ruin, wrapped in wires. The skyline, once full of glass towers, was now spiked with Varnax scaffolding. Obsidian black pylons humming with violet energy, built straight into the bones of what used to be civilization. Their orbital launcher loomed in the middle like a mechanical god. It was still under construction, but had already reached high enough to pierce the clouds. They were calling it the Heaven Chain. From what we gathered off intercepted drone chatter, the Varniks planned to use it as a space tether, a launch and supply hub for an incoming fleet. They'd stopped playing games. They weren't just trying to dominate Earth anymore. They were preparing to burn it. Once the Heaven Chain was finished, they could bring in dreadnoughts, terraforming harvesters, and worse, the Purge ships. Those didn't leave survivors. They sterilized planets. We had a window of maybe 9 days before it went operational. 9 days to do something suicidal. We weren't trained for this. Brent had mining experience. Nolan was a hard-headed laborer with a thirst for payback. I had a military background, recon, mostly, and one tour in orbital support before everything fell apart. Ayana knew the old ways, the sacred trails, and Leah, well, Leah was our knife in the dark. She could move through rubble like smoke, and she'd slit a Varnik scout's throat before you even saw her reach. We never asked where she learned that. She never offered. But we trusted her, and out here trust wasn't optional. It was survival. The plan was simple, which meant it was probably going to get us killed. We'd split into 2 teams. Ayana and Brent would stay on the outside, intercept drone patrols, and provide distraction if needed. Nolan, Leah, and I would move through the underground access tunnels beneath Seattle, old sewer lines that hadn't been mapped since the collapse. If we could get close enough to the Heaven Chain's core node, we'd plant the last working EMP charge I'd recovered from a downed Varnik's cruiser. The charge had a 15-meter blast radius and a 5-second delay. It wouldn't destroy the structure, but it would disable its quantum power source long enough to halt construction. Maybe even trigger a chain reaction in the surrounding systems. It wouldn't stop the war. But it'd buy us time. And maybe, just maybe, get their attention off the Guardians and back onto us. That was the point. Make them bleed. Make them afraid. The sewers smelled like time. Mold, rot, rusted blood. The Varniks hadn't wasted time clearing them. They didn't think we were smart enough to use the old ways. That was their weakness. They thought humans only lived in cities, only fought above ground. They forgot we were rats when we needed to be. We moved silently, avoiding sensor webs and motion-triggered heat spikes. Nolan led with brute force, shoving collapsed debris aside with his bare hands, and that dented sledgehammer he treated like a relic. Leah stayed in the rear, listening for footsteps that didn't belong. I kept us steady, checking my crude map and counting the steps. 7 hours in, we hit the first sign that something was wrong. The tunnels weren't just old, they were alive. I don't mean in a metaphorical way. I mean the walls breathed. Flesh-like vines pulsed behind broken pipes. Something warm dripped from the ceiling, smelling like copper and salt. And we started hearing things, voices, whispers in languages none of us spoke, but all of us somehow felt. At one point, Leah froze and pointed her knife into the dark. "There's something behind us," she said. "Not Varniks." We spun, weapons raised. But there was nothing there, only air that felt too still, and shapes in the shadows that didn't quite move right. Nolan muttered, "These tunnels, they ain't empty, they're watching." It was Ayana's voice on the comms that broke the tension. "We have contact," she whispered. "Varnik scout team, 5 clicks north. We're leading them away." "Hold position if you can," I said. "We're under the city core. Something's off." There was a pause. Then Ayana said something that still sits in my spine, like ice. "You've entered old ground, the roots of memory. Be careful." The signal cut. We pushed forward. After 10 hours underground, we reached the lower base of the Heaven Chain. The air changed, colder, metallic, humming with unnatural rhythm. The chamber above us, from what we could see through the cracks, was a massive cylinder of moving machinery, a core so advanced it seemed organic. Varnix tech wasn't built. It grew, shaped like bone, humming with stolen energy. The access node was 30 meters ahead, guarded by 2 Varnix sentries, tall, plated bastards with energy lances and eyes like molten stone. We didn't wait. Nolan went first, sprinting like a beast and bringing that hammer down on the nearest one's shoulder. It shattered like glass. The second one spun, blade arm flashing, but Leah was already behind him, driving her knife into the creature's spinal socket. It took less than 6 seconds. Then it was quiet again. I moved to the core, pulled the EMP charge from my pack, and started calibrating it. It was crude, old Earth tech, but sometimes simple is best. No hacking, no codes, just raw disruption. As I locked it in place, I noticed something behind the core. A carving. No, not a carving, a warning. Etched into the wall in a spiral pattern, written in perfect English, in a script too precise to be human. We are not Earth's first children. We are its last chance. Underneath that, smaller. If you awaken the old ones below, you better win, or everyone dies. I stepped back, heart hammering. "What is this place?" I whispered. No one answered. Because then the walls opened. I don't know what else to call it. The chamber shifted like muscle tearing itself open. From beneath the floor, a shape emerged. Not Varnix, not Guardian, something in between. 9 feet tall, humanoid, woven from vines, stone, bone, and lightning. Its head was a twisted knot of roots, shaped like a skull. Its arms glowed with geothermal veins, and when it moved, it didn't walk. It flowed. I raised my rifle. Nolan stepped in front of me. But the thing didn't attack. It looked at us. No words, no growl, just silence. Then it stepped aside, and behind it something opened. A path. A spiral staircase made of black rock and bone, leading down. Leah said what we were all thinking. Why would the Varnix build down? They didn't. This wasn't their doing. This was Earth's. I wanted to leave. Detonate the charge. Run. But Nolan, of all people, said it first. "I'm going in." "You don't even know what it is." "Exactly," he said. "And that means they might not either." The bastard had a point, so we went down. The staircase led to a room so wide I couldn't see the end, and in the center was a machine, or a tomb, or maybe both. A sphere floating above the ground, humming like a heart, covered in ancient glyphs, some human, some alien, some older. I approached it, and it spoke, not aloud, inside my mind. "You are not worthy, but you are what remains." I don't remember falling to my knees, but I did. Visions slammed into my skull. Oceans boiling, skies on fire, ancient wars fought beneath mountains, civilizations erased before humans were even born. I saw the truth. Earth had guardians, but not just to defend it, to contain what it once was. This planet wasn't a cradle, it was a cage, and the Varnix had broken a lock. We were waking up Earth's protectors. But if we went too far, we'd wake up its prisoners too. I staggered back, bleeding from my nose. Nolan caught me. "What happened?" he asked. "We have to blow this place," I gasped. "Now!" "What's down here?" "Something worse than them." Leah nodded. Then we heard the klaxons. Varnix reinforcements were coming, lots of them. We sprinted back up, the Guardian figure sealing the path behind us without a word. I slapped the EMP charge, set it for 30 seconds. We ran. Halfway through the tunnels, the ground shook. A low, grinding rumble that felt like the planet itself clearing its throat. Then silence. And then laughter. But it wasn't human. And it wasn't Varnax. It came from somewhere deep below. Something that had felt us. Not ready to rise. But awake. We didn't stop running until our lungs gave out. By the time we collapsed into a flooded tunnel north of the Heaven Chain site, the EMP pulse had already done its job. We heard the collapse echoing through the concrete like thunder trapped in stone, the power grid inside the Varnax launcher failing, drones shorting out mid-flight, entire pylons flickering and then blacking out. It worked. But we didn't celebrate, because of the voice, that whisper in the deep. It hadn't come from any Varnax con. It had come from below, and it laughed like it remembered us. I'd rather fight 10,000 Varnax before hearing that sound again. We regrouped with Brent and Ayana the next day. They'd barely made it out alive. Their position had been overrun by a patrol squad, and Brent had taken a glancing hit from a plasma lance. His left arm was cooked from elbow to wrist, wrapped now in soaked gauze and duct tape. He didn't complain, just smoked in silence and stared into the woods. Something about the air felt heavier. Even the trees seemed tense. "Too many things waking up," Ayana murmured, as she traced her finger across a strip of bark. "Not all of them were meant to." "What was that place?" Brent asked, voice low and hoarse. I looked at him, then at the others, and I told them everything I saw. The visions, the machine, the voice that called us Earth's last chance, the prison. No one spoke for a long time. Then Nolan, always the hammer, broke the silence. "So what now? We just let whatever's down there rot?" "No," Leah said, her voice flat. "We make sure it stays down there." "And how the hell do we do that?" Brent growled. "We barely survived the Varnax. Now we're supposed to seal away some ancient demon that predates history." "We don't," Ayana said quietly. "The Guardians do." That same night, we saw the sky burn again, this time not from war, but arrival. The Varnax reinforcements had come. 12 Dreadnought-class ships, each the size of a mountain descending into low orbit. They weren't here to patrol. They were here to purge. The EMP delay we caused had forced their hand, and now the real occupation had begun. Whole regions went dark under their arrival. Glassing beams tore through rainforests. Cities that hadn't yet been touched, Havana, Cairo, Jakarta, were vaporized. They weren't trying to rebuild or conquer anymore. They were wiping the board. A cleansing, and we knew what was coming next. Final extinction protocols. We had to move. With the Heaven Chain disabled, the Varnax fleet would rely on their secondary network, planetary anchors. These were gravity-latched pylons placed in key regions to keep the dreadnoughts stable during atmosphere deployment. Without those anchors, their fleet couldn't maintain low-orbit firepower without tearing itself apart from planetary stress. Our new mission was simple. Destroy the anchors. There were 4 left on the map Leah stole from a fallen Varnax officer. 1 in Siberia, 1 deep under the Sahara, 1 on the Great Rift in Kenya, and 1 hidden beneath Antarctica's ice. Too far. Too deep. But we weren't going alone this time, because the Guardians were moving too. Over the next few days, the world changed again. Reports came in through broken radios and old hardwired satellites, scattered but enough to give us a picture. The first was carving a path through Canada, heading north. Locals called it the Walking Mountain. Every time a Varnax base tried to intercept, it wiped them from the map. The deep one had retreated underground. It was crawling through fault lines, using the planet's seismic veins like tunnels. Earthquakes followed in its wake. It was heading south, toward the Sahara anchor. The one who returned was missing, last seen turning an entire Varnax outpost in Mongolia into dust. But we weren't sure if it was still on our side. Then came something new. A Guardian none of us had heard about. It rose in the Pacific. a tidal beast made of coral, rusted ships, and living storms. The survivors who saw it described it like a walking tsunami with a face of shattered stone. They called it the Drowned Judge. It didn't just attack Varnak's fleets. It judged humans, too. There were whispers that it had sunk 3 boats of survivors off the coast of New Zealand. Maybe it saw us as part of the infection, or maybe it just didn't care. The Guardians weren't here to save us. They were here to correct the balance. If we were part of that balance, good. If not, we'd burn just the same. We made our way east, aiming for an old military cache near Yellowstone, rumored to still have tech we could use to reach one of the anchor points. Along the way, we ran into another survivor band. 23 people led by a man named Riker. He'd been a Marine before the invasion. Hard eyes, harder voice. He didn't trust us. Didn't trust me, especially. He said we'd brought the Guardians down on them, that we'd stirred up things better left buried. "You don't wake up a storm and expect it to blow where you want," he said, pressing a finger into my chest. "You think this is a war? No, son. This is a reckoning, and you just lit the fuse." I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. That night, I stood outside our camp, staring at the mountains. Lightning rolled in from the west, but there was no rain, just heat, pressure. Ayana stepped beside me, quiet as always. "You saw the truth, didn't you?" I nodded. She looked tired. Not weak, just worn, like she'd lived too many lives already. "Earth doesn't hate us," she said. "It just remembers what we did." I didn't know if she meant what humans had done to the planet, the strip mining, the wars, the pollution, or what the first civilizations did, the ones before history, the ones that might have unleashed the things now stirring beneath the crust. "We didn't start this," I whispered. "No," she said, "but we might have to end it." We reached the Yellowstone cache 3 days later, half buried in ash, wrapped in overgrowth, guarded by a collapsed geothermal vent that reeked of sulfur and fire. Inside were broken satellites, half-dead AI systems, and one thing that changed everything. A command module linked to an old global defense network. Pre-invasion, possibly pre-modern, and it was still online, just barely. We spent the next 20 hours wiring it into our battery reserves, praying it would still function. And then we saw it. A signal. Coming from the Arctic. A Guardian signature. But this one was different, stronger, and not moving. Dormant, but not asleep. The name displayed on the module? Eternum. I didn't know what it meant. But Brent did. He whispered, "That's Latin. It means forever." We had a decision. Go south and join the others in trying to stop the anchor in the Sahara, or head north to where the last and possibly oldest Guardian slept beneath layers of ice, watching, waiting, dreaming. I looked at the map, then at my people, and I made the call. "We go north." They didn't argue, not because they agreed, but because they had nowhere else left to go. As we packed, I sat alone for a moment near the edge of the cliff outside the bunker, watching ash fall from the sky like gray snow. I thought of my brother, his laugh, the way he could sleep through artillery drills, the dumb tattoo he got on his shoulder that said victory or vodka, gone in an instant, wiped away like the rest of us. I didn't want revenge anymore. Revenge was too small. I wanted memory. I wanted these invaders, and this planet, to remember what we were. Not gods, not monsters, just men. But men who didn't break. The Arctic wasn't quiet, not anymore. Even before we reached the northern ice fields, we felt it. The winds had changed, sharper, colder, like they carried whispers with them. The kind that didn't reach your ears, only your bones. 3 days into the march, Brent collapsed. Not from exhaustion, from pressure. It's like something squeezing the air out of me, he gasped, gripping his chest. Like gravity's wrong. Ayana helped him up and said it calmly, like she'd known it was coming. We're in the range of its dream. She meant Eternum, the oldest guardian. We hadn't seen it yet, but it had seen us. We moved slow. Food was low. Temperature dropped past 40. The comms stopped working. Nolan started talking to himself when no one was near. Leah slept with her blade across her throat, like she didn't trust her own dreams. And me? I started remembering things that weren't mine. Memories, images, a jungle that never existed, a black sun, a man, not human, sitting on a throne of roots and fire, speaking a language I somehow understood. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. But I knew this. Eternum wasn't just asleep. It was remembering. And we were walking straight into the middle of it. We found the tomb at the heart of a glacier shaped like a spiral, not naturally formed. No cracks, no peaks. Just a perfect ring of ice wrapped around a hole in the world. Brent called it what it looked like. A keyhole. And when we got close enough, the ice split open with a sound like thunder drowning. A shaft opened. Descending into blackness, lit by faint veins of green and blue light that pulsed like a sleeping heartbeat. I thought it was machinery at first. Then I realized the walls were alive, not metal, not stone, something in between. We climbed down, one by one, into a place no human was ever meant to return. The tomb was older than language. That was the only way I can describe it. Even Ayana, who'd seen things none of us could explain, fell silent. She touched the walls like she was greeting an old god, one she'd been taught to fear, not worship. This isn't a guardian, she whispered. This is older than guardians, older than Earth's memory. I turned to her. You said guardians were Earth's protectors. She shook her head. They're not all Earthborn. Some were left behind. We reached the heart of the tomb by the second day. No food. No fire. Just a growing hum inside our skulls like a migraine with no mercy. The chamber was a dome of black ice, and in the center, suspended above a frozen lake, was a figure. Humanoid. Giant. Wings folded, arms bound by chains of light that flickered in and out of reality. Its face was covered by a mask shaped like a star, split in half, and it was still breathing. Slow. Measured. Eternal. Eternum. It wasn't asleep. It was waiting. And the moment we stepped into the chamber, its head turned. Without sound. Without movement. Just awareness. Leah dropped to her knees instantly, eyes wide, mouth trembling. Nolan muttered, "We shouldn't be here." He was right, but it was too late. The chains holding Eternum began to crack, not physically, conceptually. Like they were tied to our presence, like the very act of being seen was loosening its bindings. And then we heard the voice, not out loud, inside our skulls, deep, calm, ageless. You bring fire into a house of ash. I felt something crawl across my spine. My knees buckled. Brent screamed and pressed both hands to his head like something was crawling through his memories. "What is this?" I grunted. "What are you?" The voice didn't respond right away. Then, "I am Earth's first protector and its last prisoner." Ayana stepped forward. "You were sealed. Why?" A long silence followed. Then, "Because I was too human." The temperature in the chamber dropped. Our breath froze mid-air. Eternum spoke again. "When the first war came, I disobeyed. I chose your kind, and I was punished for it." "What war?" I asked. But the vision came before the answer. It hit us like a tidal wave. We weren't standing in the tomb anymore. We were watching a memory, a world in flames. Not Earth. Older. Humans, or what looked like early humans, fighting alongside beings of stone, fire, wind, guardians. But something else came. Not Varnax, not alien. Something wrong. Tall, eyeless creatures wrapped in entropy and hunger. Creatures that devoured planets, not for food, but for silence. They called them the Unmakers, and they came not to conquer Earth, but to erase it, to remove the idea of life. The Guardians fought back, but Eternum, he chose to protect humanity, not the planet. And that was the betrayal, because Earth doesn't value survival, it values balance. And when he tipped the scale for us, the others turned on him, sealed him in the ice. For 10,000 years! We snapped back to the chamber, gasping. The chains around Eternum were unraveling. You seek to save your kind, the voice echoed, but will you do what your ancestors could not? Which is what? Nolan growled. Sacrifice? No. Remember. And then the real question came. Will you kill your own to keep the balance? We didn't answer, because above us the ceiling cracked open. The Varnax had found us. They dropped 2 Hunter-class crawlers into the tomb with no hesitation, each the size of a tank, multi-limbed, armed with thermal cannons and plasma claws. Nolan didn't blink. He rushed the first one with nothing but his hammer. I followed, gun blazing. Leah vanished into the shadows. Brent screamed as the second crawler's cannon lit up, and then exploded in a flash of molten blue. Eternum had opened his eyes. And the crawlers burned to ash. No sound, no fire, just decay, like time caught up to them in an instant. We turned to him, and Eternum was free. The chains lay in shattered sparks on the ice. He stepped down onto the frozen lake and looked at us with eyes that held everything. Life, death, memory, betrayal. You opened the door. He didn't thank us. He didn't smile. He just walked past. Ayana dropped to her knees and whispered, "It's beginning." "What is?" I asked. She didn't look at me. She looked at the cracks in the walls, the trembling in the air, the shift in gravity. Judgment. We emerged from the tomb into a new sky. The auroras were red. The stars were gone. And in the distance, on the edge of the horizon, we saw something rising from the sea. Something massive. Something not a Guardian. Something the Guardians had buried. A final one. And we knew the Varnax were no longer the greatest threat, because what Earth had buried wasn't just power, it was memory. And now it wanted to balance the scales. The first sign that the Guardians were no longer on the same side came just after sunrise. Not that the sun meant much anymore. The sky was bleeding. Red mist choked the clouds. Birds didn't fly. The wind didn't blow. Even the insects had gone still. We were camped near the edges of the Bering Sea, trying to regroup and signal the survivor bands we'd left in the south. The cache's transmitter had been rewired, boosted, and fused with whatever tech Brent and Leah had yanked from Varnax drones. Still spotty, but it worked long enough to catch a single static-heavy message. The drowned judge turned on us, its sinking cities, human and Varnax both. Repeat. The Guardian in the Pacific is hostile. Repeat. The signal cut. No more. We stared at each other in silence. They're not unified, I said, voice hollow. They never were, Ayana replied. She sat on a rock, hands clasped like she was praying, but to no god. Just to Earth itself, as if it might answer this time. They weren't made to love us. They were made to correct us. Their loyalty ends at balance. And if the scales tip the other way, Brent asked, then we're next. Eternum hadn't spoken since we'd left the tomb. He walked alone. Always behind or ahead. Never beside. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't blink. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the horizon like he was seeing the bones of the planet beneath it. Watching something we couldn't feel. Yet. It was Leah who finally said what we were all thinking. He's not looking at the Varnax. She was right. He was looking west, toward the Pacific, toward something older. We kept moving. East this time. Why? Because we didn't know where else to go. The world was collapsing, and our only thread of reason was this. The Varniks still held the Siberian anchor, and if we didn't stop it from stabilizing the rest of their orbital fleet, Earth would be glassed before the Guardians could even decide if we were worth judging. We had 6 days. Maybe less. Brent, still bandaged and half-burned from the last firefight, built a sled using drone wreckage to drag our gear. Nolan found a working rifle buried in a frozen corpse outside what used to be a research outpost. I carried the last EMP core. It wasn't enough to destroy the anchor, but it would cripple it long enough for Earth to do the rest, assuming Earth still gave a damn. 3 days in, we saw our first Unmaker sign. It wasn't big. Just a black spire, maybe 15 feet tall, jammed into the earth like a splinter in the skin of the world. No markings, no sound. Just a faint vibration, like it was remembering something through the dirt. We didn't go near it. We didn't need to. Eternum looked at it, stopped walking for the first time in hours, and whispered something in a language none of us understood. Then he said, in ours, "They are coming, and they will not bring conquest. They will bring erasure." Later that night, I sat beside Brent near the fire. The wind was hollow, like the land had been scooped clean. He stared into the flames and said, "Do you remember when we were scared of alien rifles and plasma blasts?" I laughed. Once. Bitter. Now we're scared of memories. He nodded slowly. I'd take another invasion over this unraveling. That word stuck in me. Unraveling. That's what it felt like. Like the world wasn't just dying. It was being unwritten, thread by thread. The next morning Nolan was gone. No signs of struggle, no blood, no drag marks, no heat trail. Just gone. Leah and I searched for hours. Nothing. The snow had fallen strangely. Not soft, but solid. Like a shell. Every step cracked like old bone. Eternum stood at the edge of a cliff, watching something none of us could see. "He didn't leave," he finally said. "He was taken back." "What the hell does that mean?" I demanded. Eternum turned slowly. "Some of your kind were built from what they tried to erase. Their blood remembers the beginning." "You mean Nolan?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked away again, toward the east, toward the mountains, where the sky flickered like a wounded animal breathing through smoke. We found the Siberian anchor on the 5th day. It wasn't a machine anymore. It had changed. Varnik's tech usually looked like bone and energy twisted into metal. But this had grown. It pulsed. It had veins. It was absorbing the land around it, melting permafrost, feeding on the geothermal vents beneath the mountains. A mutation. Maybe from the Unmaker's influence, or maybe from Earth, trying to fight it with rot. We hid on a ridge, watching Varnik's soldiers patrol the perimeter. At least 30, heavily armed, focused, no drones. That was strange. Then we saw why. There were shadows moving in the snow, not humans, not Varniks, things with too many limbs, moving wrong, leaving no footprints. Brent whispered, "Those aren't Guardians." I shook my head. "No, but they're not Varniks either." "Then what the hell are they?" Eternum, standing behind us, answered flatly, "Forgotten things." We waited until nightfall. Leah and I moved first, silent under the veil of storm. Brent followed with the EMP core, wrapped in thermal shielding. We didn't know if we'd get inside. Didn't even know if we could find the power junction. But we had to try. Before the sky went red for good. Inside the anchor, it was worse than we expected. The walls breathed. Literal lungs. Slime-coated muscle. Heat. Wet sounds in the dark. Varnik soldiers were gone. Eaten. Absorbed. bones crushed into the walls like forgotten prayers. Something had taken over the anchor, something that didn't belong to either side. The Unmakers weren't coming. They were already here, small, invisible, leaking through the cracks in time and memory, and this thing, this anchor, had become their door. We didn't speak. We just moved, room to room, until we reached the core. It wasn't a machine anymore. It was a heart, and it was dreaming. A voice echoed as we stepped inside. This world was not yours. You were tolerated. Brent collapsed to his knees, gasping. I dropped the EMP into place. Leah watched the walls. Something moved behind them, watching, shivering in reverse. We activated the core. Timer, 20 seconds. We ran. Not from explosions, from reality tearing itself open. The halls twisted, the doors blinked, time slipped. But we made it out, just barely, and behind us, the anchor pulsed once, and then died. Back on the ridge, Eternum stood still, his eyes glowing like ancient stars. "You've done what your ancestors could not," he said. "What's that?" I asked. "You remembered." And then, for the first time, I saw him smile. Not joy, something older, maybe pride. But the sky wasn't clear, the clouds weren't calm, because in the distance, something vast was rising. Not from the sea, not from Earth, from inside the stars. The Unmakers had seen Earth's resistance. They were coming to erase the idea of Earth itself. And I realized something I hadn't before. The Varniks didn't just invade out of arrogance. They came here because Earth had once been the last planet to survive the Unmakers, the last place that fought back. And now, we'd awakened the only things that could fight again. But the cost? The Guardians were no longer allies. They were forces, and Eternum turned to me with one final truth. Earth will survive, but not all of you will. And we both knew. The final battle wouldn't be Varniks versus humanity. It would be Earth versus everyone. And we were trapped in between. We watched the sky tear. It didn't fall. It didn't burn. It peeled, like something underneath was finally done pretending to be stars. At first it looked like clouds were moving wrong, like someone had reversed time in the upper atmosphere. But then the sound came. A vibration that didn't touch your ears. It hit your bones, your thoughts. The Unmakers had arrived. They didn't descend in ships. They didn't enter orbit. They slipped through. One moment the sky was bleeding mist. The next, it was full of shadows without shape, holes in existence itself. They weren't black. They were the absence of everything else. And wherever they passed, things forgot how to exist. Trees didn't burn. They vanished. Rivers didn't boil. They unspooled like they had never been water. Even the Varniks, arrogant, proud, technological giants, screamed like infants when the first Unmaker touched one of their cruisers. The ship flickered for a second, then blinked out of space. Gone. I fell to my knees, not because of the cold, because my brain couldn't hold it all. The sky wasn't a sky anymore. It was open, exposing whatever came before light, before sound, before memory. The Guardians moved, finally. And they did not move together. The first, the walking mountain of bone and bark, rose from the Canadian wilds and charged north, every step cracking tectonic plates. It roared without sound. Trees withered in its path, not because it meant to harm them, but because it was no longer part of this reality. The Deep One split a fault line across the Sahara, sending waves of molten earth rolling toward the Varniks' footholds. But it didn't turn when the sky broke. It descended, back into the crust, hiding, waiting, or returning to where it had come from, and the drowned judge. It began sinking continents, not targeting Varniks, not chasing Unmakers, just cleansing. We had no orders, no plan. We were 5 broken people following a being older than history, hoping it remembered which side we were on. Brent had stopped talking. His left arm was nearly useless now, half frozen. He kept walking anyway. Leah was different, calmer, sharpened by the collapse. A silent knife. Always watching the horizon like she expected death to walk out of it at any moment. Ayana. She'd gone quiet too. But not with fear. With certainty. She knew things now. She spoke to the wind like it owed her answers. And Eternum? He didn't lead us anymore. He followed something only he could feel. We reached a ridge overlooking what was left of the Varnak's high command structure in eastern Russia. It wasn't a base anymore. It was a ruin. And standing in the center of it was something new. A guardian we hadn't seen. No, not new. Returned. Made of starlight and bloodstone. Taller than the others. Wings of cracked crystal. Eyes that blinked in time with the Earth's heartbeat. Eternum stepped forward and dropped to one knee. Leah whispered, "Who is that?" Ayana answered, "The architect. The original. The first to bind Earth's will into form. Not a warrior, a judge." The architect looked at us, not like a being looks at prey, but like a storm looks at broken trees. Not cruel, not kind, just inevitable. And then it spoke, not in words, in remembrance, our minds filled with scenes we had no right to witness, not war, not peace, but the in-between, when the first humans walked alongside titans of stone, fire, water, wind, before we called them guardians, before they turned on us, before we forgot what we were. The architect had tried to protect the balance, but we broke it. We killed forests to build empires. We traded oceans for industry. And then, when the Unmakers came the first time, we chose survival over balance. We unleashed weapons that scarred the planet forever. And the Guardians? They remembered. They sealed themselves away, not to protect us, but to protect everything else from us. The architect showed us one last memory, a warning, a timeline. Earth, dying slowly under both Varnak's conquest and Guardian retribution. But the Unmakers? They wouldn't just kill Earth. They would erase the idea of it. Memory, biology, orbit, all undone, nothing left, not even the possibility of Earth. And then the architect asked a question. It rang inside me like a hammer. Will humanity choose balance this time, or just another victory? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because I didn't know. Even now, I still don't. Eternum stood, and for the first time I saw conflict in him. He had once chosen humanity, and paid the price. Now, he looked at us like we were a gamble not worth repeating. The architect spoke again. The Varnaks cannot win. The Unmakers will not lose, but you may be the variable. Brent spat blood and said, "We're not variables. We're men." Eternum smiled again. That sad, tired smile. "Then prove it." That night, under the bleeding sky, we prepared for the end. Not the end of the world, the end of choice. Either we'd convince the Guardians to stand together, or the Unmakers would erase everything before dawn. We split up. Brent and Leah would make contact with what was left of the southern bands. The remnants of Earth's resistance fighters, survivalists, soldiers, old-world hunters who hadn't stopped fighting even when the cities burned. Ayana and I would go west, toward the rising void, where the drowned judge was last seen. And Eternum? He would walk into the storm of the Unmakers, alone, not to fight, but to remember them. To see what they feared, if they feared anything at all. As we broke apart, Brent handed me his last bullet. Old-fashioned, steel-jacketed, human-made. "Just in case," he said. I nodded. Didn't ask what "in case" meant. We both knew. Ayana and I walked into the sea. Not metaphorically, literally. The coastlines were gone. The ocean stretched across what used to be thousands of miles of cities, forests, homes. The drowned judge had turned continents into memory, and he stood at the horizon, half submerged, waiting. We called out to him. No response. Ayana stepped forward, into water, up to her chest. She began to sing. Not a melody. A tone, a vibration that matched the earth's pulse. And the drowned judge listened. His head turned, and for a moment we saw its face, not a monster, not a god, just sadness. Like it had tried once, long ago, to save us, and we'd made that impossible. Ayana shouted, "The Unmakers are here!" The sea boiled. She kept singing. "They come for everything, even you!" The drowned judge lowered its head and nodded. We didn't know if it would fight. We didn't know if any of them would. But as the sky opened wider, and the Unmaker's full form began to spill into existence like oil across glass, one by one, the Guardians turned. The first rose from the soil, carrying entire forests on its back. The deep one erupted from beneath the Andes, dragging mountains behind it. The one who returned broke the clouds like shattered glass, wreathed in forgotten light. The architect walked across the stratosphere, bending space as it moved. And Eternum. He stood at the edge of the breach, unarmed, unmoving, and said only one thing. Not this time. The first Guardian to fall was the Deep One. Not by enemy hands, by its own choice. We watched it rise from the Andes, its crust-laced body glowing with molten veins, then plunge back into the planet's mantle with a sound like the world screaming through stone. It sealed itself inside the tectonic plates, locking them, freezing Earth's core from within. Why? Because the Unmakers had begun bending gravity. If they had cracked the fault lines, the planet would have shattered from the inside. The Deep One gave up its body to keep Earth whole. Eternum whispered as it sank. Balance demands sacrifice. I think it hurt him, but he never showed it. The Unmakers had form now, not humanoid, not monstrous. They looked like errors in space, humanoid silhouettes made of wrongness. Like someone had tried to draw a person and ended up sketching a hole in existence instead. Every step they took erased history. Not buildings, events, places we remembered, cities, wars, even names, flickered out of existence. I looked at Leah once and said, "Remember Detroit?" She said, "What's that?" I felt ice in my chest. I remembered it. She didn't. It was already happening. We weren't just dying. We were being undone. The Guardians struck first. The first, the mountain-made flesh, roared across the northern tundra and met the lead Unmaker head-on. Their clash broke the clouds. Lightning spiraled inward instead of out. It fought like Earth had grown tired of being patient. Every strike shattered miles of land. But it wasn't enough. The Unmaker didn't fight back. It absorbed. Every memory in the first's body, every root, fossil, storm, scream, bled into the Unmaker. It was learning, and it was growing. Eternum stood at the edge of it all. Still, silent, not fighting, remembering. And I finally understood. He wasn't Earth's greatest weapon. He was Earth's witness. The only one who had seen the first war, the first fall, and now, the final chance. And that meant the burden would fall on us. Not to win, but to choose. We reconnected with Brent near the Altai mountain range. He'd lost a hand, burned down to bone, wrapped in black cloth and pain. Didn't complain once. "Leah got two bands together," he said. "Old Russian holdouts, Mongolian stragglers. They're not organized, but they're angry." "Good," I said. "That mean we got a plan?" "No," I said. "It means we have a chance." We moved to higher ground, Eternum leading, the rest of us following like shadows in wind. In the valley below, 3 unmakers had begun carving the earth open. Not physically. They were pulling possibility out of the soil, feeding on it, turning the planet into raw potential, an empty, quiet place without past or future. And in the middle stood the architect, motionless, still deciding. That's what broke me. The one who shaped the Guardians, who gave Earth form, was watching both sides, waiting. "Why doesn't he act?" I asked Diana. "Because he's truth," she said. "He doesn't choose sides. He balances scales." "But the Unmakers," she cut me off. "To the architect, the Unmakers aren't evil. They're correction. If life becomes noise, deletion is music." I fell to my knees. Everything in me said, run. But something deeper said, stand. Because if we ran now, Earth wouldn't be destroyed. It would be forgotten. And that was worse. So I did what no one expected. I walked toward them, the Unmakers, the architect, and I raised my voice. I remember. That stopped them. All of them, even Eternum. The Unmakers tilted their heads. No faces, just void. I kept walking. I remember the wars, the cities, the sky before it burned. I remember our mistakes, our arrogance, our greed. The air buzzed, reality strained. But I also remember love, brotherhood, holding the line even when it was lost. I remember choosing death over surrender, again and again. The architect turned. First time he'd looked at me. I remember Earth, not as a prize, but as home. I stepped into the circle, Unmakers all around me now. You can erase our names, you can burn our bones, but if even one of us remembers, you haven't won. Silence. And then Eternum spoke. That is the variable. Brent and Leah emerged behind me, weapons drawn, not to fight, to stand, and one by one, survivors climbed the ridge. Not an army, just the refusal to forget. The Unmakers moved, not toward us, through us, trying to bend time again. But this time, it snapped. Eternum raised his hand, and the world pulsed. Not with power, with memory. Old roads returned for a second. Mountains healed their scars. The air tasted like summer. And the Unmakers slowed, confused, because they couldn't feed on what refused to forget itself. That's when the architect chose. It raised both hands. The sky turned white. Not light, not fire. Purity. And it crashed into the Unmakers like a storm made of first breath. They didn't scream. They just stopped being. Not destroyed. Locked. Trapped in a loop of remembrance. A world that would not let go of itself. When the light faded, only one Guardian still stood. Eternum. The others were gone. Faded back into the earth, the sea, the ash. Their job was done. Eternum turned to us. You will forget me. No, I said. You must, he replied. That is the price. Earth will heal, but memory must sleep, or this war will return. What about the architect? Leah asked. He was never meant to choose, but he did. That is enough. Brent asked, and us? Eternum touched his chest. Live, but live better. Then he walked into the sunrise, and vanished. It took years, but the world healed. Not like before, not shiny, not perfect, but real. Wounded, but standing. And sometimes at night, I still hear the hum of a guardian in the wind. Still feel the stare of something old under the dirt. Waiting. Not in hate, not in love. Just watching. Because Earth doesn't forget. Even if we do.